Hello, ladies and gentlemen. It's nice to see you today. My name is Dustin Cormier, and welcome to How to Rock Astrology. Today, we are going to be continuing our reading of Light on Life, an introduction to the Astrology of India. It's a book written by Robert Svodoba and Hart to Fouw. We're on Chapter 3 now, and this is going to be the beginning of Chapter 3, where we delve into essential astronomy for Jyotish. Now, this is going to be an important chapter. Anybody who hopes to get anywhere with the symbology and the psychomechanics of astrology, even if you don't plan on being an astrologer, you just want to learn better what the symbols are, what they mean, what their dynamics mean for your own sake, even you, everybody, is well served to get the guts on what are the astronomical sciences that are the material, physical, tangible ground of the planets themselves that enliven or embody the symbology we know of astrology that so many people just love to read the mythos of. The astronomy counts. So we're going to be talking about that today. In particular, in this episode, we are going to be talking about the zodiac, how it's built up, and that leads us inevitably to a conversation about the Ayanamsha. We're going to be getting to that eventually here as well. Now, the Ayanamsha, and lastly, in this episode, we're going to talk about planetary motion and it's the zodiac and the planetary motion within the zodiac that kind of makes up really all of what astrology is. Oh, my nose is just giving me some trouble right now, but whatever. So, the Ayanamsha is a controversial topic in the world of astrology right now. There are many ways to define this thing called the Ayanamsha. There's only one definition of it, and certain people take from that definition different things. It essentially is the bridge between what we call sidereal Vedic astrology and tropical Vedic astrology, as well as all the other Ayanamshas that exist. Different people measure the planets in different ways. So it's a topic of much debate and huge passionate discussion, because the gate between the two measurement styles is so wide that people in Western astrologers who consider that they have they're born in the end of October and they've always thought that they were a Scorpio, find themselves being a Libra in the Vedic tradition with the so-called Vedic sidereal tradition. Of course, not every Vedic astrologer is also a sidereal astrologer. Some of them, like me, are tropical astrologers. Of course, this book is trying to give a perspective, a holotropic perspective, seeing on top of all the different Ayanamshas and trying to hold the space for what astrology essentially is, through which you can apply your own Ayanamsha to the study of astrology. Of course, this is the fun of this chapter, so I hope you guys enjoy the ride with me as we talk a little bit about it. So this is Chapter 3. Instead of me just yammering about it, we're going to get into our reading here today. It's essential astronomy for Jyotish. Because astrology depends on astronomy, certain astronomical concepts must be understood before we can introduce the 3 steps of Jyotish, which are, namely, calculation, representation, and interpretation. These steps that these authors kind of unfold as to what Jyotish is. The first step in most astrology is to calculate a map of the heavens, as seen from the time and place of an event, such as a birth. That map is then represented symbolically as a horoscope or birth chart in the case of a birth. So that's representation. Only when we have a precise map can we accurately interpret that map's meaning, for inaccurate calculations ultimately make for incorrect interpretations. This is why your astronomy is important, because if you may not realize it, but you have, by delving into astrology, you've chosen one or the other sides of this Ayanamsha debate. And it could be one or the other. People are getting good results with both. Ideally, I'm inclined to suggest that there's only one and that mine's the right one, just like everybody else does. Don't mind my Scorpio coming through. But ideally, again, with stuff like this, we have to give the space for, you have to, this is my point, is that you ought to choose by your discretion, by seeing the reasoning in all sides, before just blindly taking a side. At least give both their due process. And you'll see what I mean as we come along. The zodiac is the first thing we're going to talk about. Although objectively, the Earth moves around the Sun in an elliptical orbit, we on Earth subjectively see the Sun appearing to move around the Earth. The path of this motion is called the ecliptic. The movements of the planets used in Jyotish are confined to a band in the heavens, which extends approximately 8 degrees to both the north and the south of the ecliptic, as seen from the Earth. This limited swath of sky within which the planets are constrained to wander, planet is Greek for wanderer, is the zodiac, which is divided into 360 degrees. Each degree is divided into 60 minutes of arc, and each minute of arc is divided into 60 seconds of arc. This has to do with the trinary computing system that is astrology and its circles. It's an interesting thing to think about. Essentially, when you look at any astrology chart, you'll see, the moon is at 18 degrees 32, and then you'll see a little dash, like a little apostrophe at the end of that, and then you might even see 55 at the end of that with 2 dashes, and that's like minutes of arc and seconds of arc. It's coming after the shape of a clock, right? The degrees are like the hours, the minutes are like minutes, and then the seconds are like seconds of arc. Of course, it takes 60 seconds, or 1/60th of the distance from one degree to the next to make up a full degree. That's just how they split it up. So, although there is only one ecliptic, and as a consequence, only one zodiac, the latter is given 2 different names to differentiate between 2 ways of measuring the same circle: the Tropical Zodiac and the Sidereal Zodiac. Each circle of these zodiacs contains 360 degrees, and each is divided by astrologers into 12 equal segments of 30 degrees each. The 12 divisions of the tropical zodiac are known as signs, and the 12 divisions of the sidereal zodiac are known as constellations. Signs, in a way, represent the seasons of the sun in a certain way, the seasons of the Earth's rotation around its own chakra magnetic field, each of the signs representing a part of the chakra system of the planet, reflecting our own. Many people have the conception that Capricorn and Saturn, being both anciently ruled by Capricorn and Aquarius, being anciently ruled by Saturn, can be likened to the first chakra, the root chakra. From there, expands outward to Sagittarius and Pisces, ruled by Jupiter, which is the second chakra. Then there's Aries and Scorpio to the left and right of that, which is considered to be the third chakra, the solar plexus, etc., all the way up. So the tropical zodiac is derived by the Earth's rotation through this chakra field that we're talking about, whereas the sidereal zodiac is derived from the stars themselves, rotating around the constellations in the sky, and the stars particularly. The sidereal zodiac is basically married to what are called the nakshatras, which are stars, fixed stars in the sky. To make a long and short of it, the tropical zodiac is considered to be a dynamic moving zodiac, which moves against the backdrop of the starry sky, so that the signs that we see in the sky were never meant to be fixed signs. It's just at the time, 2,000 years ago, when the sun was in the tropical sign of Taurus, in the fourth chakra, coming out of spring, the sun at that point, 2,000 years ago, would have happened to have been in the, let's say, the nakshatra Rohini, a certain star, which at the time astrologers painted to be Taurus, the sign of Taurus, the tropical sign of Taurus. Now, the sun, the ecliptic has shifted since then, in my opinion and interpretation, so that now, when the season of Taurus, coming past spring, into the heart chakra, past Aries, when that dimension, when that experience is happening seasonally, the sun is in a different place from where it would have been 2,000 years ago. Although we still call it the sign of Taurus, sidereal astrologers consider it, the sun is now in a different constellation. Therefore, it's not in Taurus anymore. The sun in that case would be in Gemini. So that's the division happening here. Now, the majority of non-Asian astrologers use the vernal equinox, the apparent position of the sun at the commencement of spring, as their starting point for their measurements along the zodiac. Because of certain complex astronomical phenomena, the point of the vernal equinox, where the sun is when it comes into Aries, changes slightly each year, receding against the background of the sidereal starry constellations, the sidereal zodiac, at an approximate rate of 1 degree every 72 years. It's probably pretty thick, but I'm just going to read this from the book to give an exact replica of the author's interpretation. Thus, if spring began at point X in relation to the sidereal zodiac in the year of 1938, it will begin at a point 1 degree less than X in the year 2010, because the vernal equinox will have moved in the opposite direction to the apparent usual direction of motion of the planets. This is called the precession of the equinox. Because the vernal equinox moves against the background of the fixed stars in the zodiac. Sorry, I'll start that again. Because the vernal equinox moves the point where the sun is at during the vernal equinox, the oncoming of the sign of Aries again, because the sun's position in the sky at that time of the year moves against the background of the fixed stars in the zodiac, of the sidereal zodiac. The astrologers of most ancient cultures, including India, favored measurement along the zodiac from a starting point that was more permanently fixed in relation to the zodiacal stars than is the vernal equinox. This is, of course, for those who are watching and who are leaning towards the sidereal side of this debate, the authors of this book, ironically, are actually on the other camp, who considers that the sidereal constellations, those fixed stars, are the true anchors of the zodiac. And that's what they're saying. The astrologers of most ancient cultures, including India, and it is true that India does it this way, favored measurement along the zodiac from a starting point that was more permanently fixed in relation to the zodiacal stars than is the vernal equinox. So for them, the seasonal sun, the earth rotating around the sun, it's coming through its chakras in the according to the seasons. This is null for the sidereal Vedic astrologers. So this zodiac is known as the fixed or sidereal zodiac. Sidereal, of course, means pertaining to the stars. While the zodiac measured from the point of the vernal equinox, which moves in relation to those fixed stars. The stars are fixed, but the sun, the earth spinning around the sun, and the wobble and the weird projection that can happen between the sun and the earth, that changes over millennia against the background of the sky. It's like, it's going this way and it's straight, but over time it's going this way. And so we are seeing a different angle even though the relationship of the sun, of the earth revolving around the sun, the earth revolving around its own chakras, that has not changed. The only thing that has changed is the backdrop of the stars, which is less important to the tropical astrologers, but more important to the sidereal astrologers. Hope this is making sense. So, the sidereal zodiac is this one we're talking about, which is based on a fixed point, the stars. While the zodiac measured from the moving point of the sun's position at the vernal equinox, which moves in relation to the fixed stars, this is called the movable or tropical zodiac. Tropical means pertaining to the turning, which refers to the turning of the sun at the time of the equinoxes. And that has to do with the sun's path from the north and south points in the sky. Having to do with the solstices, really. Once it passes summer solstice, the sun starts making its way towards the north again, I believe. And then it goes past Christmas, the sun dies for a while, and then it starts making its way towards its peak in the summer again, where the days start getting longer again. That is the pertaining to the turning that the word tropical is talking about. Jyotishis call the former the Nirayana chakra, loosely the wheel without movement. That's the Sidereal Zodiac. And they call the latter the Sayana chakra, which is the moving wheel. And some astrologers consider both to be important. Usually the sidereal astrologers consider the tropical zodiac to be like an adjunct, a kind of a cool little extra bit of data that might be interesting. Some tropical astrologers are also are bridging the gap and saying that there's something in the tropical and there's something in the sidereal. Personally, I don't think that that's the case. I think there's only tropical. I'm just one of those people. I'm a Leo rising. I'm a Scorpio. I'm rather fixed about this particular thing. I don't know. That's my idea of it. Although that doesn't mean that we can't all find harmony, discussion, cultivate a singularity of intent and purpose with regards to our individual applications of astrology together as a collective. But in this case, I think that, well, in any case, I should probably just keep where I'm at. The Sayanacha. All right, so my point was that sidereal people, anciently, most Indian astrologers are siderealists, to be fair. That's the case. Because the Indian government actually officially uses astrology, and the official Ayanamsha that the government of India uses is the sidereal style. So many people do, and those who do typically consider the tropical zodiac to be like another dimension of the energy field that's interesting and important, but not as deeply integral or reflective of karma as the true zodiac, which is the sidereal one. So, though Jyotishis have long been aware of these two ways of measuring along the zodiac, according to these authors, the many traditions of Jyotish have consistently rejected the tropical zodiac for astrological purposes, though it is sometimes used for calendrical design. Now, I'm going to stop interjecting because we should let the consciousness of the authors flow from their own discretion. You guys have heard my caveat, but now let's get to the text that we came here to read. The Sidereal Zodiac uses fixed stars, singly or in groups, as markers to identify its different segments along the band of the zodiac, in such a way that each 30-degree segment contains within it most or all of an identifiable group of fixed stars, known as a constellation. The tropical zodiac measures its signs from the point of the vernal equinox, which changes each year with relation to the constellations. These signs have nothing in common with the constellations after which they were named, except for those names. Those with a background in Western astrology must therefore be careful not to confuse these constellations of the sidereal zodiac with the signs of the Western zodiac. The zodiac signs and constellations currently in use are, in order from the zodiac's beginning: 1. Aries, 2. Taurus, 3. Gemini, 4. Cancer, 5. Leo, 6. Virgo, 7. Libra, 8. Scorpio, 9. Sagittarius, 10. Capricorn, 11. Aquarius, 12. Pisces. Because some of the stars which make up the 12 constellations of the zodiac actually appear outside the 30-degree band that each constellation is assigned, the constellations seem to have been originally created in non-standard sizes, which may imply that the constellations antedated the signs of the tropical zodiac. The 27 or 28 Vedic constellations, known as nakshatras, likewise seem to have begun life as irregular asterisms, which later became standardized as equal slices of the sky. That's an interesting point. These are all very interesting thoughts. Yeah. So, in the early days, before the institution of the uniform zodiac and the standard circle of nakshatras, Jyotishis may well have made their observations using individual constellations and nakshatras as their frames of reference, just as now their frame of reference is the whole of the zodiac. If so, it would reinforce the idea that Vedic astronomical observations were based less on degree precision and more on the characteristic behavior of celestial bodies moving in that area of the sky. Which is very interesting and definitely makes some interesting sense. I would contend that if this is the case, if it was based purely on observation, this could have been done at a time where the tropical signs were lined up with the sidereal constellations. It's a crazy internal part of this debate that can always keep rocking and rolling. So let's talk about, you guessed it, we're going to get into the thick of it, talk about the Ayanamsha. We've already pretty much laid out the confusion and the situation with this debate. Now let's dot it out even further. Once every 25,800 years or so, the starting points of the sidereal and tropical zodiacs coincide. Because we said after once a year, the sun at the vernal equinox is going to start. It's going to be at a certain place in the sky at that time of the year. And next year, it'll be basically at the same spot, but just slightly over more. It's like the original spot in the sky is lap timing where the sun is supposed to be. The sun is actually lap timing its original place in the sky. And the original place in the sky from this point on, whatever this hypothetical point was, say 10,000 years ago, the sun and the vernal equinox would be here. The sun is in this place at the start of spring, April 21st or whatever is that official day. Yeah, whatever. At the start of Aries. And then as time goes on, the sun will be farther along in its progression at that same date in the annual year, because spring is an annual phenomenon. And that sun's place at that annual phenomenon of the earth revolving around the sun being in that position of the sky, it will be farther along in the sky than its original place 2,000 years ago, 10,000 years ago, what have you. So, once, that means that as time goes on, again, every 72 years, the sun is 1 degree ahead. What this works out to mathematically is once every 25,800 years or so, the starting points of what we would call Aries in the sidereal constellation, the constellation of Aries, and the tropical zodiac, the phenomenon of spring, coincide in the same place. After this coincidence, these points will separate from each other by the above-mentioned approximate 1 degree of arc for each subsequent 72 years. The distance between the starting points of the sidereal and tropical zodiacs at any given time is known in Sanskrit as the Ayanamsha, which roughly translates to the portion of movement. I would throw in the idea that Victakara, I believe, when he defines Ayanamsha, he generally defines it as Amsha, just like Navamsha is the 9 portion. Amsha means like portion, division, segment. And the Ayana is summer solstice. So what it's kind of saying, if I understand it correctly, is what portion of the sky does the summer solstice occur in? Or, it's the changeability of the summer solstice. In the same way the tropical represents the same thing, the turning of the sun. It basically, Ayanamsha translates to where has the position of the sun during the summer solstice moved to. Essentially saying the same thing as, like the vernal equinox, just from a different part of the seasonal round, which is the summer solstice. I digress. That's something I just wanted to throw in there. Now, there is some controversy over the year in which the starting points of the two zodiacs last coincided, which makes determination of the Ayanamsha one of Jyotish's major confusions, one which is probably unresolvable. Each Ayanamsha has its staunch proponents, and each deserves respect, since each is the work of eminent Jyotishis possessing considerable experience and intuitive insight. Known ancient observations of planetary and stellar positions do not precisely correlate with modern observations. We do not know whether those ancient observations were wrong due to less precise measuring technology, or whether there have been perturbations in stellar positions or planetary motions over time, which I think is the more likely candidate. It may even have been, well, I guess I should say both of those are likely candidates. It may have even been that the rate of the equinox's precession has been changing over the course of the past several thousand years. There is thus no way to be sure when the last coincidence occurred. The most widely used year in India for this coincidence is 285 AD, and this Ayanamsha is known as the Lahiri or Chitra Ayanamsha. Some other Ayanamshas widely used in India are those of Krishnamurti, which is the AD 291, as well as Raman, which is AD 397. The majority of Indian Jyotishis use and get good results from the Lahiri Ayanamsha. That's the one that I said the government standardized. Since the fledgling Jyotishi should probably first acquire experience by being grounded in the most widely used of the Ayanamshas, this book expresses all planetary positions in the Sidereal Zodiac using the Lahiri Ayanamsha. Important caveat for this book. That's why I'm not going to do the example charts at the end. But I digress. Hope you guys... I'm a Sagittarius moon, and I just love to poke fun at the parameters of my position of things, even when I'm reading this book for a reason. The fact of the wisdom that comes from the authors here really just goes to show that wisdom can penetrate any society or culture, and these gentlemen have that wisdom. Even though I don't necessarily practice their way of measuring, I do deeply appreciate their understanding of the method of interpretation. But I digress. A sidereal zodiacal position is converted to a tropical zodiacal position simply by adding the Ayanamsha for the year in question to the sidereal zodiacal position. To go from a tropical to a sidereal position, the process is reversed, and the appropriate Ayanamsha amount is subtracted from the tropical position. The Ayanamsha to be added or subtracted is obtained by multiplying the averaged rate of the accumulated Ayanamsha, which, according to Lahiri, is approximately 50.29 seconds of arc per year. And you multiply that averaged rate of the accumulated Ayanamsha by the number of years elapsed since the most recent year of coincidence of the tropical and sidereal zodiacs. It's a lot to take in. Table 3.1 indicates the amount of various Ayanamshas for the 20th century, approximated to a minute of arc. The Ayanamshas for the Ayanamsha for intervening years can be arrived at by simple proportion. This is that table here. Lots and lots of different Ayanamshas. Ayanamsha values of different authorities rounded to the nearest minute. In the year 2000, there are three great differences between these three prominent authorities. And that could mean a huge, complete difference in your chart. You could have your ascendant in the Lahiri Ayanamsha. You might have your ascendant on 13 degrees, 19 minutes of arc, and the ascendant will be, let's say it's in Leo. That's right around where mine is. The ascendant would be in the Navamsha sign of Cancer. But if you are instead under the Ayanamsha of K.N. Rao, then maybe your ascendant then in that case would be, it would actually be switched around. Raman has progressed less. So for the sake of it, let's say if you use the Raman Ayanamsha in a Leo rising chart at 13 degrees 19 minutes of arc. The ascendant in the Navamsha would be in the sign of Cancer. But if you use the Lahiri Ayanamsha for that same chart, same number of minutes, same date, same time, same everything. If you use the Lahiri Ayanamsha, that ascendant could be at, say, 13, it's almost a whole, that's almost a degree and a half. So your ascendant could be instead in the Navamsha of Leo. And that's a completely different destiny, a completely different Navamsha chart. So it just goes to show that it seems small, but this could completely give a completely derailed reading. And this is already difficult because astrologers already have to deal with the fact that most people's birth times are accurate only within 5 minutes of the stated time. In a general note, right? So, in any case. So, we've just looked at the amount of various Ayanamshas for the 20th century. Now we're going to start talking about something a little bit more fun, which is planetary motion. The Earth's rotation from west to east creates the illusion that the heavens rotate around the Earth from east to west, so that the constellations, in their natural order, flow anti-clockwise for observers on Earth. Like the sun, the planets daily appear in the rise in the east, and they set in the west in a clockwise direction for an observer who is facing south. This is called diurnal motion, motion relating to the Earth's spinning, not an inherent motion of the planets themselves revolving around the sun. It's from Earth's perspective, the planets revolving. The geomantic perspective. In addition to this apparent motion around the Earth, once every 24 hours, the planets also seem to move along the zodiac over time, as seen from the Earth, as a result of their orbits around the sun, and in the moon's case, its orbit around the Earth. This is called proper motion. Diurnal motion seems to take a planet east to west in the local sky of the observer, while proper motion takes it west to east through the stars of the zodiac. Diurnal motion, which completes its cycle once daily with one complete rotation of the Earth on its axis, is always faster than proper motion, of course. The following are the approximate proper motions of each of the planets. These are only averages. Mars, for example, can under certain conditions occupy one constellation for up to 6 months. So here we have them. The sun goes 1 degree per day. The moon goes 13 degrees 58 per day. Mars goes 38 minutes per day rather. 1.5 months per constellation. Mercury is 1 degree 19 per day. Jupiter is 5 minutes per day. Venus is 1 degree per day. Saturn is 4 minutes per day. Rahu is 3 minutes per day. That is degrees in the zodiac. The sun, we know, there's about 360 degrees in a circle, and the sun goes approximately 1 degree per day, meaning that it would turn and go 360 degrees in a year. Again, give or take. So, while diurnal motion never changes its direction, the proper motion of every planet except the sun and moon does. As the Earth orbits the sun, we repeatedly seem to lap the other planets. When this happens, our frame of reference makes it appear that these planets are moving backwards against the fixed stars. Of course, this seeming backward movement is termed retrogression, retrograde. While the averaged proper motion of Rahu and Ketu carry them backwards through the zodiac, some modern writers have pointed out that, due to complex perturbations of the orbits of the Earth and the Moon, the invisible positions of the nodes sometimes move forward. Since classical Jyotish does not mention this change of motion, it is not regarded as the retrogression of the nodes. Yeah, I just wanted to burn that in my brain. The invisible portions of the nodes sometimes do move forward. But since classical Jyotish does not mention this change of motion, it's not regarded as the retrogression of the nodes. Retrograde really specifically means physical objects appearing to be skewed in their motion due to Earth lap timing them in the spinning, the dual spinning of the two. So, retrogression always begins for the outer planets, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn, when Earth sits between them and the sun. Right? So if I can think of it correctly, there's the sun, the Earth. I wonder if I can make this happen here. So, here's the sun. Earth revolving around the sun. Right? So when Earth is here, the sun is here. The planets are on the other side of the sun, over here. These are the outer planets, okay? Now when Earth comes in, Earth is still closer to the sun than those outer planets are. Mars, Saturn, and Jupiter. So the Earth is in between those planets and the sun. When it comes back around, all of a sudden the Earth is over here, the sun is there, and those planets are out there. This is part of what's going on with this retrograde motion here. So, this is why they're saying that retrogression always begins for the outer planets, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn, when Earth sits between them and the sun. These planets are always brightest and therefore strongest when they are nearly opposite the sun in the sky, because it is then that we are closest to them. Just to build that up again. This is the sun. How did I have it? This is the sun. This is the Earth. And when the Earth is... I just want to get this right. When Earth sits between them and the sun. So the outer planets are here. Earth is here. When the Earth sits between them and the sun, that's when retrograde motion begins. These planets are always brightest and therefore strongest when they are nearly opposite the sun in the sky, because it is then that we are closest to them. So the sun in the middle, this thing, appears to be opposite those planets. Earth is here, those planets are here, sun is here. Sorry if my voice was a little loud there. Jupiter and Saturn move backwards once each year. Mars is not as cyclical in his retrogression, which is one reason we call him the crooked, Vakri. Vakri also happens to be the Sanskrit word for retrograde. Because Mars was observed to be independent in the skies, he gained a reputation for causing independence in the horoscope. Here, once again, interpretation follows observation. It's cool to see how the guts of astrology even came about in these psychedelic synchronistic ways. The situation for the inner planets, Mercury and Venus, is a bit more complex. While Venus does not necessarily go retrograde each year, Mercury retrogrades several times annually. Even though Mercury's perceived motion is an average of 19 minutes of arc per day, more than that of the Sun or Venus, Mercury goes retrograde so often that, like the Sun and Venus, it covers only one constellation every 30 days on the average. Sometimes the planets conjoin the sun in the sky and are lost in the sun's glare. In this state, they are referred to as being combust, burned up by the sun's rays, and therefore they're considered to be agitated, something we will learn not in this book, but eventually you'll learn as the Lajitadi Avashtas. But on a very basic level, even Westerners know about the condition of combustion, being conjunct to the sun, where the planets are burned up in the sun's rays. In Sanskrit, we speak of them as being ashtam, which means having set, because they have become as invisible as any heavenly body becomes when it sets. The outer planets, who become combust when they are furthest from Earth, become extremely weak astrologically when obscured by the sun's rays. The situation for the inner planets is, again, more complex. They can be combust either when nearest or when furthest from the Earth. Both of those are considered a combustion. And either when retrograde or when in direct motion. When either Mercury or Venus is combust while retrograde, it is weakened astrologically, but less so than when combust while in direct motion. Is weakened astrologically, but less so than when combust while in direct motion. So Venus is weakened even deeper when it is not retrograde and it's combust. So that was our beginnings of our essential astronomy for Jyotish. Now we still have a whole another section to read about regarding the houses. And that's going to be our next episode, coming along as soon as is possible. This whole section of the book is important grounding stuff, and I hope you guys are enjoying it. I'm Dustin Cormier for How to Rock Astrology. Check me out in the next episode, and we're going to probably finish off Chapter 3, talking about the houses of the horoscope. And as this episode was a bit more about the proper motion, planetary motion, the planets revolving around the sun, to the zodiac, Ayanamshas, etc. The next episode is going to be a little bit more about the geomantic perspective. What do the turning of these planets mean from the Earth's perspective? The houses, the bhavas, etc. So I hope you guys dug that. I'm Dustin Cormier. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys on the next one.